Alright, so let's talk about John Woo's The Killer. This 1989 Hong Kong classic is a remarkably moody and expertly directed picture of guilt, crime, and redemption. It came with some remarkably heavy influences as well. It draws from such films as Le Samurai and Mean Streets, for being a film about hitmen, violence, and the internal questioning of man's escape from a life of death. And it does all that with an exciting and striking style all its own. The film follows the weary triad assassin Ah Zhang, played by Chow Yun-fat. He's aiming to get out of the business of killing and takes on one last job. During a shootout, he ends up blinding the torch singer Jenny. He then decides to make his final mission one to restore her vision by amassing the money for her surgery. And while raising that money, Zhang and Jenny start falling for each other. However, she doesn't know that it was his fault for her blindness, and his guilt makes this relationship all the more conflicting. It's all quite bittersweet, but what's even sweeter is the relationship that Zhang has with the police detective Li Ying, played by Danny Lee. They have a rivalry as the cop and the killer, with the cop aiming to bring in the hitman. However, the more that Lee learns about Zhang, the more he comes to understand and even respect him. The recognition leads to the ultimate team-up of the film's incredible shootout of a climax. Now, upon first glance, The Killer may seem like just another 1980s action extravaganza, but it's actually one of the more revolutionary movies of that era. John Woo had started perfecting this mixture of love and bullets with A Better Tomorrow in 1986. That film was a box office success and also featured Chow Yun-fat as a major draw. With the film being such a hit and so many other filmmakers copying that movie, it almost felt like Woo had to come up with something even more groundbreaking for his next film. And just, wow, does The Killer succeed at this. It's a movie that's somber and hopeful, but never feels like there's a battle between the action scenes and the dramatic exchanges. There's this perfect marriage of gunplay and emotions that push the film forward. The flow is so smooth that it never feels like this scene is supposed to be exposition or this fight is only there to look cool. I mean, yeah, if we're being honest here, the fight in the church looks amazing, but it's also telling us more about the relationship of the cop and the criminal. Both of them exist within corrupt systems that are greedy and violent. They reside within a world where innocent people are murdered for no reason. Worth noting about the church is the religious iconography that is not saved from the brutal shootout. And through all of this, two souls learn to fight for more than themselves. It's why the film is as hopeful as it is cruel. The Killer is very operatic in this type of staging. Woo gives his characters such life and sympathy that by the time the violence breaks out, there's tragedy in it. The many killings and shootouts are intense, but they're treated with a draining nature. The cop and the killer are both people who have seen lots of death in their profession, and it shapes how they view their own world. It's why it makes the most sense that the two weary men would find kinship in recognizing the inhumanity of the world they occupy. Both of them have seen the tragedy that their worlds hold, and then connect on a level of trying to attain something more. And you want to hear the wildest part of this dynamic? Part of it was inspired by Spy vs. Spy. Yeah, apparently Woo mentioned that Mad Magazine's comic about spies in a cat and mouse fight made for a great dynamic for an action relationship. Although the dynamic between the cop and the killer in the film reached an understanding, John Woo wasn't exactly seeing eye to eye with his producer. The producer of Tsui Hark really didn't like the way that Woo had previously directed the film A Better Tomorrow 2, and wanted to get the director fired from the studio. When that request was denied, Hark started shooting down all of John Woo's film ideas, and The Killer was among them, as he argued that nobody really wants to see a movie about a killer, and that there should be more focus on the cop. Hark wanted so much of the film to be re-edited and revised, including removing jazz from the film because he believed that Hong Kong audiences didn't like jazz. While Hark did end up changing some elements, he didn't really do that much damage, and as a result, Hark hated this film, especially since it actually turned out to be an international hit with audiences around the globe. And it's just a bit staggering to envision someone looking at what Woo had shot and not thinking it was badass. There's a lot of great John Woo hallmarks within The Killer, but one of the most notable was the use of doves. This aspect not only became a trademark of Woo, as seen in his other films like Face Off, but it would also become parodied and given heartfelt odes in various TV shows and movies. It's not just the doves, though. I mean, it's everything. Because The Killer was such an international hit that it inspired a slew of action-oriented filmmakers, from the likes of Luc Besson to Robert Rodriguez. And yes, there has been some talk of a remake for The Killer. Since the 1990s, every filmmaker from Walter Hill to John H. Lee have been tapped to make this remake. And it's apparently still going on, with the latest news having dropped in 2019. But don't be fooled by 2022's The Killer by David Fincher. That's not actually based on John Woo's film, it's based on a French comic, so don't worry about that movie. There's just so much I love about The Killer. Like, all the gunplay sequences are great, but there's also a lot of slow and down moments that are perfectly moody, set at night, and they have like this very somber and emotionally driving score going on. It's just, it's so good. There's a spirituality angle for how the church shootout hints at the welcoming nature of redemption, signaling that nobody is beyond saving. It has a brooding sense of sorrow in its many neon and moody atmospheres. And it's just such a good-looking film about two dudes trying to do the right thing. It doesn't really matter if they succeed, only if they try and find something more to their lives when the last bullet is fired.